thank you so much for joining us today for the third live session of the 2024 Perusall Exchange. This is our fourth edition of the Perusall Exchange, and this year's edition is focused on education in the age of AI. I hope you're already enjoying the asynchronous parts of the exchange, and I'm pleased to welcome you to a special episode of Social Learning Amplified live at the Perusall Exchange. I am Eric Mazur, host of Social Learning Amplified, a podcast series of candid conversations with educators focused on the social aspects of learning. Our guests on the episode today are José Bowen and Eddie Watson. Thank you both for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation.
Fantastic to have you here. José Bowen has won teaching awards at Stanford and Georgetown. He was dean at Miami University and Southern Methodist University and president of Goucher College. He's the author of Teaching Naked: How Moving Technology Out of Your Classroom Will Improve Student Learning, published in 2012, and Teaching Change: How to Develop Independent Thinkers Using Relationships, Resilience, and Reflection, published in 2021. He's now a senior fellow for the American Association of Colleges and Universities. Eddie Watson is Associate Vice President for Curricular and Pedagogical Innovation and Executive Director of Open Educational Resources and Digital Innovation at the American Association of Colleges and Universities. He's the former director of the Center for Teaching and Learning at the University of Georgia. He's the author of Playing to Learn with Reacting to the Past, Research on High-Impact Active Learning Practices. Together, they just published Teaching with AI, a practical guide to a new era of human learning. The book was released just a few weeks ago by Johns Hopkins University Press, and we were delighted to host both of them in a 4-week Perusall Engage event. I know quite a few of you participated in the event because I recognize some names from the event. For those of you that missed it, Perusall Engage events are author-facilitated events where for a nominal fee, you can get access to a book, even a just published book as this one, which you can, of course, read, but you also get to interact with the authors and other like-minded educators using the Perusall interface. We had a record-breaking engagement with over 500 participants. The participants left nearly 1,200 comments scattered throughout the text, some forming long discussion threads centering on a variety of topics relating to AI and education. Now, because there was no easy way for me to read all of these comments, and given that the subject of your book is AI, I thought it would be appropriate to use Perusall's built-in AI to provide a summary of the participants' discussion. And I don't know if you did that yourself, but it's kind of interesting to see. And I'm going to summarize the summary because otherwise I'm talking too much and we really want to hear from you. What emerged were 5 main topics. 1, assessment and academic integrity. 2, bias and accuracy. 3, impact on the workplace and skills development. 4, privacy and data ownership. And finally, 5, inclusivity and accessibility. I would love to go into greater depth on at least some of these subjects. Before we do, however, I'd like to even out the field for some of our listeners who are just getting started with AI. Your book stresses the practical, it's right there in the subtitle, a practical guide. What recommendations do you have for faculty members just deciding to get up to speed with generative AI? What should they start with? Or maybe do next for those who have just gotten started?
My recommendation is that first you practice, and so I'll put a link in the chat. All of the prompts from the book are on the teachingnaked.com website /prompts. I can't type and talk at the same time, apparently. But I think that before you can have a conversation about ethics or bias or all of the things that you mentioned, you have to understand what the tools are and what they can do, right? It's not just ChatGPT. And if you've been using the free ChatGPT as your only exposure, then you've basically been using a modem and AOL, and you think you know all about the internet. And so, so it also turns out that if you ask a generic prompt, you get a generic answer. So AI is much, much better when you give it context, right? We say in the book, you treat it like a naive intern. Right? Or like 100 naive interns, right? Which if I gave you 100 naive interns would not be that useful right away, but over time it could be if you use them in the right way. So the first thing is to sort of get that sense of how it works, how there are different types of tools. If you've not tried Latimer and you think, you know, ChatGPT is AI, then you should try some of these other tools. A math tool, you should, you know, try Explain Paper or Perplexity. But get a sense of what the different types of tools do, because a lot has happened in the last 3 weeks, certainly 3 months or 6 months.
Yeah, I think I echo what Jose just said, which is probably not surprising given that we wrote the book together and we spent a lot of time talking about these issues. But you know, I think for folks who haven't had much experience with AI yet, my first recommendation is to gain access probably to paid versions of the more advanced generative AI tools. And like right now, ChatGPT 4 Omni is free. I feel certain before the fall semester gets here, it will again have a paywall up. But right now we're in a very good window where there's an opportunity to try it for free. I would recommend just take assignments that you typically give, like you gave in the fall, this past spring semester, or you will be giving this fall semester. Just place it into a mature paid version of an AI, though again, 4.0 is currently free, just to get a sense of what it can do within the context of your course. As you think about changing things or how you might leverage AI, just knowing what it can do with your current assignments would be a baseline, a best practice for a place to start.
And that's an incredibly eye-opening experience. Over the past 2 years, I've been doing that diligently, feed my assignments to ChatGPT. And in the beginning, I was very relieved because I give my students rather open-ended problems. And then I ask them to solve these problems according to a 4-step problem-solving procedure. Getting started, where they have to sort of put the problem in their own words and describe what knowledge they're going to use. Develop a plan where they have to articulate what they're going to do to solve the problem. 3, execute the plan. And then 4, evaluate your answer. And in the beginning, all that ChatGPT did was really the execute the plan section, which is typically what students also hand in. So I thought, okay, my assignments are pretty ChatGPT proof. And then bingo, this past semester, if you tell ChatGPT, please solve this problem using the 4-step problem-solving procedure from Eric Mazur at Harvard, it comes out with this 4-step procedure. So clearly we have to rethink our assessment. Now, before we get to assessment, let's turn to, or maybe this is a good lead-in to assessment. And let's turn to some of the threads that emerged in the Perusall Engage event. A lot of the conversation, not just in, I think it was part 2, but even in part 1 and part 3, focused on cheating and AI policies. I think if I recall correctly, chapter 6 deals with the issue of cheating, and you add to that detection of cheating. Now, apart from the lack of reliability and the ease with which these detection systems can be sort of manipulated, isn't the problem really with our assessment practices? Is this going to be the moment that we're finally realizing that the way we typically assess students is not the way we should assess them? I'd love to hear from both of you on that subject. I guess Eddie has to go first.
I guess so. Well, I think we're at a very unique moment right now in higher education. I think that we have a bit of a grand challenge in front of us in that I mean, in the past, there have been disruptive technologies typically within a single discipline. Like I was a double major in English and statistics, and I was a rising senior when Minitab came out, and we had to purchase Minitab. And I remember me and my friends were all like, what have we been doing for the past 3 years? Now we have this technology that can do a lot of that previous work before. We really saw the faculty sort of like struggling and figuring out how to prepare us with that tool for the real world. And of course, we can think about Mathematica and Wolfram Alpha and a whole bunch of other tools that have emerged over time that impacted a single discipline. Right now, we're seeing that almost all disciplines are experiencing a bit of disruption that's forcing us to rethink our pedagogical practices and our assessment practices. And I guess that's why my initial recommendation was to see what AI can do within the context of your course, because that would signal to you, I think, Eric, like the experience that you had, that, oh, wait, something has now shifted. And if AI can do this now competently, then what would be my expectation of students? Like, how do I rethink what I've previously asked my students to do in terms of assessment? And I think that that is largely the grand challenge, is like, we have this notion that AI can now do a lot of work previously that technology couldn't do. So we need to embrace it and prepare our students for a world where AI is going to be richly integrated with a lot of different disciplines in the world of work. But then we also have the inclination to try to keep AI out of the classroom because our courses already have learning outcomes. So I think it's not just about assessments, but it's rethinking what are the appropriate learning outcomes within our individual courses, then what's the pedagogical practice that we should then use, and then what are the assessments? It's just the backward design activity, but it's really forcing all of us kind of at the same time to rethink many of these practices. Jose?
See, Eddie's the thoughtful one, and I'm the pithy one. So yes, yes, and yes. And my summary of that is, what we call cheating, business calls progress. But the other thing that I'd say is that we've been assuming for a long time that education, as we practice it, works, right? Because we're faculty, we're weird, right? We like school so much, we're still here. So for us, right, we were motivated to do all the reading and all the problems, and we did all this work. And so we've been assuming that if students turn in their assignments and they get good grades and we graduate them, that somehow it's working. And of course, we know that it's mostly not working, that students are not learning the things we want to do. They are not all going to graduate school to become mini-me's. And then employers have been telling us for decades that we're not training students to think critically like we say we are, that students don't have the kind of core skills of communication, teamwork, thinking for themselves, right, challenging assumptions, the things that we all say are part of a liberal arts education. And so I do think this is a wake-up call, but I think it isn't just assessment or just the way that we work. I think it's about saying, well, what is it that we want students, what are the intellectual skills we want them to have, and how do we get them there? And I really do think we've been assuming for a long time that our midterm final and even our active learning is working, and we have to take the research on pedagogy much more seriously about what students do. Because for the most part, students are doing the work so they can graduate. And then a small percentage of them will always be cheaters. And then there's a small, even tiny percentage of them who will become future faculty who just love school and will do all the work. But I think we've underestimated the motivation and how we just designed the whole project. And now is the chance to rethink it.
I want to remind our listeners about the Q&A box. I already see one question there, but don't miss an opportunity to put in your questions for our two guests today and upvote other questions you'd like to have answered. So please do that before it gets too late and we run out of time. So let's take that concept of assessment, and I love that you mentioned backward design. Eddie, I'm a firm believer in backward design. Start with the outcomes, then ask yourself, how am I going to assess that? And then, optimize the pedagogical approach to maximize the output. Makes so much sense. A year ago, Ethan Mollick popularized the term homework apocalypse. I think somebody mentioned it in one of the comments in your book to refer to the fact that ChatGPT invalidates traditional assignments. And I just told you about some of my own assignments. Can you give our listeners, because I think this is something that is on the mind of every educator, can you give our listeners some examples of new types of assignments that work well in the age of ChatGPT? You're smiling, Jose.
Well, I'll start with, so they aren't assignments that are AI proof. We started off the book with this idea that we would write a chapter on AI resistant and then AI inclusive assignments. And the students we showed it to quickly said, oh, no, here's how I do that. So there are not a lot of AI resistant assignments. It really is kind of the homework apocalypse. So there are, though, some things that you can do. I mean, first of all is, right, talk to students about why, right? Motivation is key, right? When we go to the gym, we don't cheat on the push-ups because we understand that only the person who does the work gets the benefit. So, and gym teachers do little things like they count backwards. So we have to be constantly reminding our students, this thing that we're doing is going to have this effect. Here is why we want to do that. We have to be much better at motivation in general, because there are going to be ways to cheat. But there are lots of assignments. So process assignments, there are lots of new tools where students can write in a website, and then the version history is kept. But there are also a whole series that we have a whole chapter in the book about assignments that use AI, have a dialogue with a historic figure. And so I'm not going to grade the parts that AI says Socrates would say, but I'm going to assess your ability to ask better questions and respond to this figure. Have students do a graphic novel, have them run a simulation, right? AI is really good at complicated simulation. So are there tools? AI is also a good inventor, right? Have AI come up with 500 new products. You only need 3. So which are the best 3? Right? How do you assess that? How do you figure out which ones are viable, which one customers will like, which ones have the right profit margin, right? So you could design an assignment where students can use AI, but then also recognize that in order to get a job, you have to be better than AI. You have to have some skill that AI doesn't have, some expertise, some human component. And so explaining that to students goes a long way, but being inventive in our assignments. And of course, if you're really stuck, you can ask AI for 50 examples of new assignments I could prescribe to meet this learning outcome.
Well, I'm not sure that I love the homework apocalypse metaphor, but if I extend it, I think that it's probably more of a curricular apocalypse. I think that it's like understanding, well, what are the new learning outcomes that we should be teaching? In addition to sort of placing your assignments within AI, I think that's one thing to do this summer if you haven't spent much time with AI, to see what AI can do within the context of your course. But I would also recommend that you reach out to, if you have an advisory board for your program or your department or for your college, talk to those in the world of work to discern what are the new skills that they are now looking for. I mean, the survey from Amazon about 6 months ago said that there's a significant AI skills gap that employers from all business sectors say that they're experiencing. Okay, so well, what are those skills that they say that they are now in need of or that they now demand? Have those conversations this summer. Then as you go into the fall semester, you have some decisions to make. If you teach accounting and you produce a lot of accountants that go to work in your region, talk to those employers, see what the technologies are, the skills are, how things have shifted. And then once you have that list, then you're kind of in a decision tree. It's like, do we just leave the curriculum the way that it was, or do we then reflect upon what employers say that they currently need and will likely need a year from now? Do we make changes to our senior level courses? Do we make changes to our broader curriculum? But in the absence of information, we'll do nothing. So I think being able to learn more about how AI functions within the context of our class and how the world of work is shifting. I mean, higher ed has many purposes, but certainly most of our students would agree that one of the purposes is to prepare them for the world of work. So I feel like there's some immediacy to have these conversations to better understand how our discipline might be changing, especially for entry-level positions. and then revise our curriculum and our assignments within that curriculum to meet those emerging or emergent needs.
And here's on the sharp end of that. So, right, there's already an AI premium for students who can use AI to make them better and faster, that they're already going to make more money. I had a teacher at the University of New Mexico a few weeks ago say to me that she did 6 recommendations for students this year, just a few weeks ago, and said that all 6 of them, all 6 companies said, can the student use AI? Explain how the student can use AI to make their work better and faster. That was this year. So there's a premium there. But at the same time, we're also seeing that the low-level jobs, internships, junior positions, are starting to go away, right? Because those are the things that, even if you think AI is terrible, it can do intern-level work. So the problem for us, I think the big curricular problem that Eddie highlights is, how do we create student graduates who are experts in something, right? And because when they graduate, you have to be a senior lawyer without having gone through the mistakes of being a junior lawyer to get right. And so the same is true in lots of professions. So that's a real curricular challenge. We're actually thinking about, how could college take over some of that internship function? Maybe, right, there's since we have AI tutors coming at us with full force from both Google and OpenAI, that maybe the delivery of content becomes way less important, and integrating that content and giving students experience and practice like an internship during their 4 years of college will provide a difference. So I think this is an opportunity, and a challenge, to think very differently about how we prepare students for a world where they still need to be able to think for themselves, to understand and be skeptical, understand what's relevant. None of those things are going away, but the practice time that people used to have by being a junior journalist or lawyer or doctor or PR person or whatever, all of those things those opportunities are now going away.
First of all, I love what you said about gym trainers count backwards. I'm already thinking I'm going to number my modules backwards. We don't start with module 1 and end with module 25 at the end of the second semester. No, we start with module 25 and count down. I think I'll adopt that.
Well,
But also,
we know that from the 1930s, because Charles Hull discovered that rats run faster in the last part of the maze, right? When you get close to the goal, you get excited.
I'll adopt that. So what you said, I think, in a sense, necessitates two sort of mind shifts. One is we need to start applying backward design not to individual courses, but to the curriculum as a whole. I have not seen that happen, at least at the institutions that I visited, and certainly not at my own institution, done in a cohesive way. Faculty are inherently independent and are not working together. I think K through 12 in generally does better in that respect. The other thing is a shift from focusing on content to focusing on skills, and to have sort of a transverse curriculum focused on the important skills that are probably even more likely to determine the success of our graduates than the content that they encounter during their studies. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I might say I would say the dichotomy is less between skills and content and between content and process, right? That we all say, I mean, yes, skills, absolutely, but we all say we teach process. We all say we teach students how to think. And of course, you need content in order to think. We don't think in the abstract. But I think we spend way too much time, memorize all these things, learn, all of this content. And when you actually measure how much process people talk about, it's pennies on the dollar. It's minutes out of the hour. And so some of this happened with Google and with the internet, right? That content, I changed all of my exams when I realized that students could just look up answers on Wikipedia. And so I started to think, well, okay, they don't have to memorize the names of this or that. What are the other things that I want them really to be able to both to do, but also it's ways of thinking, that I'm more concerned about how they learn to think than about which content they learn, partly because, right, everything we have to teach them is out of date by the time they graduate, or most of it, right, that there's new things to learn. And so I don't want to give them a degree in the iPhone 1. I want them to be able to adapt. And so adapting is a process. So, you know, I've changed my courses so that there's much more thinking about what will you do in this situation? How flexible. That's why that last book was about teaching change, because I think that's fundamental.
I'd like to turn to a question from the audience here. Kirsten Helmer is asking, since you wrote about teaching naked without technology, where do you still see space for that, especially since AI is inherently, I'm paraphrasing the question here, is inherently technology based?
So again, so teaching naked did not mean that we needed to teach without technology. It meant that that relationships needed to have the priority. That if you were going to have students physically in class, that was not the time to say, so everybody watch my PowerPoint and read my slides in the dark. That in fact, class time should be about building relationships. There's plenty of ways to use technology outside of the class. That's what that concept was about. That's kind of like, you know, the flipped classroom model. And I think the same is true here, that we want students to be able to learn to think with AI and to do things with AI. But we also want them to be able to think for themselves and to deal with other people, especially after COVID, especially after the, you know, the social media effects that we're seeing. That, you know, students need more time having real conversations, getting to know people, dealing with, because in the workplace, that is where the value is going to be. And so I don't see the two things in conflict, because, right, we all still do email, but if you just did email and couldn't talk to people, you'd have a disadvantage.
Yeah, I think that there's a bit of a false binary that we kind of easily sort of slide into, like either, oh, we've got to use AI or AI is allowed, and now we have an AI-rich classroom versus there's no AI. And I think that there's times when we want to see what students can do without technology, and then there's times where we want to see what students can do with the technology. So I think that, you know, many universities are working on AI policies, and then you see faculty have policies now on their syllabi. I think that doesn't go far enough. I think every assignment now requires an AI policy that says, when are you allowed to use it? How are you allowed to use it? And also why? So like, if you're not allowing AI on the first 2 or 3 assignments within the semester, make it transparent to students. It's like, you can't be a good collaborator if you don't have foundational skills. So for the first 10 weeks, we will not be using AI at all. And make it clear what would be seen as sort of cheating within that context. It's like, you don't even use it for outlines, don't even use it to review your work. I want you to stand on your own feet and develop these muscles, these skills. But then near the end of the semester, we're going to be enabling you to sort of be a collaborator with AI, but make transparent in each of these contexts, each of these assessment experiences, when AI is allowed and why or why not.
And I note that both Gen Z and millennials care a lot about integrity. But when we use the words academic integrity, it sounds like something separate. Oh, well, in 4 years, I don't have to worry about that anymore, right? That's cheating. That's right. That's a special category. So I think we gain a lot when we say, let's talk about integrity and what that means. What's that going to mean in the workplace? What's it mean in your family? What's it mean in our class? Because students do care about integrity, right? They've all been to the movies. What happens at the end of the movie? Credits, right? You know, that's not academic integrity. That's integrity. And so I think having broader conversations, because students really do care about that. And so having that broader conversation, I think, is a lot easier than saying there are some special rules that only apply here because you're in this weird thing we call school, and they're only for 4 years, and we call them academic integrity, and we have a whole special thing. And that actually devalues it for students.
I never thought about it this way, but you're right. I mean, when we think about what we call cheating at university or in school, by that standard, we're all cheating our way through daily life. We're consulting other people, we're working with other people, we're looking up things all the time. So I never saw it this way from the point of view of a student who sees the word academic integrity and then what we as faculty call teaching in the classroom, and then see those same people practice cheating, so to speak, in their daily lives and research and so on all the time. Very good point.
And of course, a dictionary and a thesaurus are somebody else's intellectual work that we allow you to use. So right? We've been allowing, in fact, encouraging students to build on other people's intellectual work. It's part of the academic process. So what's different about this, right? And so there is a difference, but if we don't talk about ethics, who is, right? So it should, absolutely, ethics needs to be built in. In fact, one of our recommendations is that every college and university now needs a senior seminar in AI and ethics and AI and use, because, right, it's changing too fast. You can't, I mean, you should tell the freshmen too, but you're going to have to hit the seniors with, here's what's happening right now. How is this going to work? I think that would be very, very popular. You know, the environmental costs are real. Students care about that. They are going to be asked to do this in the workplace. And so we should be engaging with them and not just saying, no, but when you get to work, they'll talk about it. Because no, they won't. They'll just say, use it.
I want to get back to that in just a second. But before we do, let's turn to a question by Laura Collender, who says, do you have advice to help departments or institutions move past the frustration with AI into using it, especially for those that are reticent or overwhelmed due to fear or discomfort with the technology? Eddie, maybe we can turn to you for that.
Yes, so I think so. I think that this could be the golden age of centers for teaching and learning. I mean, there needs to be structures and support on campuses to provide guidance for faculty. I think that, you know, I sort of suggested that there's a homework assignment, and, you know, you and your colleagues should reach out to employers, and that you should place your assignments within AI. Well, that'll give you data, but then what do you do with the data? Like, what's the appropriate response? Like, if you and your colleagues talk to your advisory board, and then you've learned that, hey, there are these 7 or 8 new skills that employers say that they now demand, well, then there's who's going to teach that? You know, it's like a little bit, and, you know, Eric, you were sort of speaking that higher ed hasn't historically done this well beyond the silo of an individual course. So the whole notion of curriculum mapping. So it's like within our curriculum of X number of hours, where should these skills reside? At what point in the curriculum should students experience them? Certainly, the capstone location is a logical place given the rate of change, as Jose was saying. But okay, so if you choose these 4 courses are the logical place within the curriculum, well, there are now 4 faculty or more than 4 faculty that are tasked with teaching those individual courses. Some of them are likely leaning into AI in some ways. Some of them may be pushing away. So, well, what are the structures in place within that department or within that institution that then help facilitate change? And higher ed doesn't have a great record on rapid change. You know, we're not really good at rapid change typically. So
you're being very kind here.
Well, so then what do we have in place that helps bring about that change? And there's a range of incentives that, you know, departments and colleges and CTLs have in place, you know, faculty learning communities or grant opportunities. But what's unique about this moment is that, you know, if you have these conversations with employers, you're going to find that you need to make this change to prepare your students who are going to graduate in a year. You need to make curricular change kind of this fall or, you know, into the spring. You need to bring that forward. So again, that's significant change in a short amount of time. So I think part of it is faculty commitment, but it's also incentives to help support faculty and reward faculty for engaging in this new work. And again, from one institution to the next, there's a range of different support structures, whether it's a Center for Teaching and Learning or a digital innovation office, you know, whatever it might be. But I think those offices need to be embraced as central to this kind of change because they're the ones who have historically leaned into engaging faculty. But, you know, talking with other CTL directors back whenever I was a CTL director, we once at a pod conference had a conversation over dinner, and we agreed that if we saw 30% of the faculty in a given year, then that was a successful year. But then that means that 70% weren't engaging with us and our resources and our support structures and the like. So how do we move beyond that 30% that would come see us in the 2024-2025 academic year to engage a much broader swath or a more targeted swath? Okay, so which are the programs that are doing the backward design, that are doing the curriculum mapping. Okay, it's these courses, these faculty. We'll reach out to those faculty, provide them with the support and resources and structures to help them make the curricular change within their course, but then also the changes around their pedagogical practice to prepare students for the new assignments that would then indeed be focused on developing AI literacies and competencies and skills. So there's a lot there that needs to be done in a short amount of time. I mean, I do feel that it's a bit of a grand challenge for higher ed in terms of teaching and learning right now.
And I'd add the single best way, I think, to get an AI hater to say, maybe I should pay attention is to show them a tedious task that they no longer have to do, right? Grant proposals. Here's my NSF proposal. I need to shift it now for the Wallace Foundation. Use alt, right? Boom, done. How can I make my assignment or this syllabus more inclusive? How could I change the language? New ideas for a course title. The department schedule. Right? Have it do the department schedule. Here are the faculty preferences, the rooms we know. It loves multivariant problems. Or accreditation. Anyone who sat on an accreditation committee where I had to reread 10,000 essays with a new rubric, AI can do that. Done. You should never do that. Accreditation should now become much easier and faster, but also better, because AI will read all of the freshman essays from the last 10 years and compare them to all of the sophomore essays. And it can do that almost immediately. And so you don't have to. So showing people that, okay, it's like Wikipedia, right? Yeah, there are mistakes, there are problems, but if I ask a question and I get an answer, oh yeah, that's that guy's name, right? It's like, well, maybe it's not all bad.
Another question from the audience here, Ranjana Dutta. I am struggling with what should be legitimate student learning objectives now with AI.
Well, I think one is, what can you do better than AI? Or how well can you edit, right? Do you know what good, bad, and average whatever looks like? Right? I mean, that we used to teach people, well, how do I know what good writing looks like? Well, you're going to practice good writing. And that skill may have shifted. You still have to know what good writing looks like, but it may be better of recognizing it, editing, understanding. But students are going to need to be able to know, AI has produced something that's good enough. So the other thing I recommend for faculty is start with stuff you know. It's Ethan Mollick's suggestion too, right? Start with stuff that you know, because then you will understand, right? If you're trying to teach yourself cooking by watching TikTok videos, you could get all sorts of nonsense. So start with a field where you already know what good looks like, and then see, AI doesn't produce this or does produce that. But how do we teach students to do that when they haven't gone through all of the push-ups that we have? I think that's a really legitimate learning outcome, and it's a pedagogical problem too, is how do we get students to the place where they can use it as well as we can, because that's important. At the moment, right, we are the best users because we are all experts in something. So we understand the quality issues. So I think figuring out, right, how do we create experts like that who haven't gone through all the process that we have, because it's gotten short-circuited.
I think that the conversation around, like, what are the skills associated with AI is sometimes overly simplified. You'll hear people say, well, AI literacy, that's like prompt engineering. That's kind of a piece of it. And it's certainly a piece of it, but it's not the majority of it. I mean, I think there's a range of skills that students need to develop, both before they use AI or as they start receiving content from AI. I mean, before you use AI, you should, number one, recognize that it is a collaboration, that AI is not doing work for you, rather it's doing it with you. However, you're lead author, so you have responsibilities associated with that. So sort of like recognizing, one, that it's a collaboration, but then there's a range of other things, like knowing the array of technologies, and they have strengths and weaknesses. So which one would you choose for which task and why? And that's just a couple of things before you get to prompt engineering, which is in itself odd and weird. But then once you get content back, there's a whole other range of skills associated with knowledge and expertise, like Jose was saying, being able to evaluate the content, look for bias, look for errors, edit that out. So there's a lot of writing skills associated with it. So really the domain of skills around AI literacy and the things that we need to be teaching, it's pretty broad. AI literacy is like a huge umbrella term, really, that contains lots and lots of discrete skills.
Yeah. I mean, the introduction of any new technology sort of obviates the needs for certain skills, and they sort of disappear, right? I mean, we see that throughout human history, from making stone tools to making beautiful illuminated manuscripts to long division, to using slide rules. I have my slide rules still here. Here's the proof, to understanding logarithms. So is it still going to be worthwhile to teach the skills that AI is good at? Or should we just forget about that and start from where AI brings us and train students to get that higher? Well, it's always hard to let go of things that we've taught for such a long time, but I'm asking this question just extrapolating from what we've done with previous technologies that have changed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's the right. I think the analogy is the calculator, right? That the calculator could do addition and subtraction, but we didn't stop teaching them. But we did change. We no longer teach as much long division as we used to, right? We teach students sort of how to do it, but we don't make them spend 6 months just doing more and more complicated problems, adding large lists of numbers, right? Accountants still have plenty to do. They still need number sense, right? And so, right, we changed the way we teach math. It did take some time, and not everybody agrees it was successful. But motivation is important. I have to explain to you why you need to be able to do this thing that a calculator can do. But I also have to rethink, do all of the things that I used to teach still need to be taught now that the calculator can do them? And I'd argue that, well, addition, subtraction, right, those things still need to be taught because you need to understand how those processes work. Again, process. But some things like long division, I can skimp on a little bit. And so that is indeed the question I think we're being asked to do, is to figure out what are the core skills, what are the things that students need to do, and then how do we convince students to do them, which is exactly the position we were in 1975.
Yeah, I think that knowing those skills, I think it's still emergent. I mean, you hear Sam Altman and others at OpenAI say, yeah, we really don't know how this works, which means they don't really know what the full scale and scope of what it can do. And, we see new things every day, like, oh, wow, I didn't know it could do it that well or could do this kind of task at all. That's really a creative, way to approach it. So it's like, we don't really know the full scope of what it can and can't do. So we don't really know how our learning outcome set is going to change. I think that doesn't mean that there's nothing for us to do. I think it's for us, this is something that we need to investigate and explore. I think things will be clearer 2 years from now than they are right now. I think the rate of rapid change, it will decrease as we get further away from November of 2022. But invariably, we will find that AI does significant tasks well, and we'll feel less compelled to teach those kinds of skills. Like I mentioned Minitab earlier, there was like a sea change in my academic career within statistics, in that, from the beginning of my senior year, there were certain kinds of things that I was taught early on that I haven't done ever again. But it enabled us to focus on different kinds of skills. Like, let's look more at data analysis, or like you have these kinds of findings, and what's the implications given your research questions? It's almost like you could focus on the higher level, more important kinds of questions when you're not doing so much of the mechanical rote kinds of questions. So I think there's some real opportunities here for us to kind of elevate what we, humanity, can collectively do. But I think within our own disciplines, we're going to see that there are little shifts and some larger shifts that's going to bring forth conversations within our departments and programs that may lead us to say, hey, this part of this course, we really don't need to teach it this way, or instead of this being 3 weeks, we can really kind of do an introduction and then take them to a higher level. There's curricular transformation that is certainly afoot, that's beginning across many, many, many fields.
So let me shift the conversations a little bit. You both mentioned AI literacy, and I think you mentioned, yeah, I think one of the first chapters in the first part of your book is on AI literacy, which I think is going to be crucially important because of the impact on AI on jobs and skills. We talked about how new technologies sort of shift the need to learn certain skills, but another thing is that technology also tends to eliminate jobs, right? I mean, robots eliminate a lot of assembly line work. Now with AI, I think we're going to see a huge impact on the jobs and skills that our graduates will face. The workplace will be different, and some of the jobs, you mentioned accountants, we probably can do with a whole lot fewer accountants because AI can do accounting quite well. And I think programmers are, for example, at risk because AI does a really good job programming. We will still need programmers, but probably not as many as we have now. So to paraphrase the question of one participant in the Perusall Engage event, what do you imagine AI's impact to be 5 or 10 years from now on not just academia, but the workplace? And how should we transform educational tasks and assessment and respond to these changes?
Well, a similar question was asked, 100+ years ago about electricity and factories and the mechanization. And it is true, I'm not an economist, but the work weeks are certainly a lot shorter than they were 100 years ago. And we have a 5-day work week, and we might have a 4-day work week. And right, it's possible to imagine a good outcome, shall we say. And I do think we'll probably see some shorter work weeks as a result of all of this. But jobs are going to change, and so it's hard to predict where that will be. The internet didn't eliminate jobs, it increased jobs, but it didn't increase the numbers of librarians, right? It increased other kinds of technology jobs. And so you're right, coders maybe at some risk. But people who can use AI to find useful things to do with the code, right? So I really think it's hard to say, but I think Apple's announcement yesterday, right? If all of us become as comfortable with AI, with the new Siri, as we currently are with our cell phones, right? All of us. I mean, I was a cell phone resistor, right? But now I have a cell phone. I do forget it sometimes, but I have a cell phone, and so most of us do. And it tracks me where I am, and my car knows, right? So we've given up some privacy and for a bunch of convenience, but most of us do that. And so if that happens and we all are letting AI do certain things in our lives, probably through our phones mostly, then that will certainly have a large impact. But people may say, "Oh no, I don't want that." I think it's very hard to predict, but I do think that the types of jobs. We've already seen, 30% reduction in freelance writing positions since November 2022. We are going to see fewer of some types of jobs and more of other types of jobs.
Eddie, how do you see the future?
I echo almost word for word what Jose said. I mean, the futurist is a hard job. I was on a panel during the MOOC revolution, and one of my co-panelists was asked a 5-year question, and they said, well, 5 years from now, we're only going to have 20 to 50 colleges or universities, because why would you go to your local community college if you could have the best physics professor from Harvard, teach that class? And of course, we didn't see that kind of dramatic change within higher ed. We found a little place for where large or ultra large online classes make sense. I feel like this is the first thing in my 30-year career where I go, yeah, I think that there's enough tension points that this is going to necessitate change. So what will that change look like? I think Jose's description is pretty much right on. There's going to be more of certain kinds of jobs. There's going to be less of other kinds of jobs. But within the higher ed context specifically, I don't think that the role of faculty will be diminished. at all. I think it's actually more important now, given the challenges that AI presents and the need to not only continue to teach our current curriculum and have similar outcomes to prepare students for accounting positions, physics positions, and the like, but also these additional skills that are just emerging currently. It's the position of faculty member is more complex than it's ever been, and I think will be increasingly so over the next couple of years.
I'll give one more prediction, which is that with all of the political and financial pressures on colleges, I think demonstrating results is going to matter. People are going to want to know why, right? If I can have an AI tutor teach me X, Y, and Z, what do I get from you? What is worth all of this money? And so I also think there will be pressure to have for faculty jobs to change, and for bots and things, which I think we should resist. I think we should increase relationships, right? How do I help students get across the finish line? That's a fundamentally human operation, and I think we need to focus more on the human and less on let's create some more bots.
Well, that's music to my ears, because I've always said deep down learning is social experience. In fact, it's in the name of this podcast. So I can completely agree with that. Let's take one more question from the audience. And then if there's time left, I want to briefly touch on one other aspect. Mike Mucholnaus writes, I teach at a community college. How could we use AI to help community college students get to the level playing field with others? In other words, how can we use AI to increase student equity in outcomes?
Oh, there's 1,000 ways. Go, Eddie.
Yeah, I'll go quickly and then you can take it, Jose. But I think we are at a fork in the road where AI has the potential to increase inequities, increase digital inequities. I think that if the ends of my fingers were sort of like a constellation of the sort of the span of equity and inequity right now, I think it has the potential to expand it, where those that have resources will be more advantaged because they have the skills and access, and those who don't will be further disadvantaged. But with that said, from a teaching and learning perspective, there are some real opportunities for us to better reach our students. I remember 15 years ago, I was teaching a stat class and I was making a point, and the student in the front row said, I don't quite understand what you're saying. Could you repeat that, or could you explain that again? And so I explained it using exactly the same words that she didn't understand the first time. And then the student next to her said, no, it's like that Beyonce song where blah, 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 blah. And everyone was nodding. And I was like, what just happened? So to be able to come up with a diversity of examples that maybe aren't close to our lived experience, to be able to say, give me 10 examples of this concept that the average 17-year-old from Appalachia would understand. And then now, hey, here's some possibilities that I might bring into my classroom that would help those that maybe my academic language is sort of disenfranchising from the conversation, the academic life within my class. I could actually bring them in with examples that resonate with their culture, with their background, etc. Jose.
Yeah, so using AI to get cultural diversity, to increase the inclusiveness of your syllabus, to have other kinds of examples, other kinds of names. One of the things I do is, we know that students like to see their own name and their own culture reflected in the problems. So I do a pre-course survey, I upload that and say, here is the assignment. Now I'd like a customized assignment with the student's name at the top, and then examples. Use their favorite sports team, use cultural references, use names from their, all of that, the problem set can now be customized, and the student is more likely to engage with that because they see, I never once saw Jose and a Juan, dividing figs and mangoes in my math class. Not once ever. So two tools I'd recommend. One is goblin.tools. Which was designed for neurodivergent people, but everybody can use it. It will divide. Here is a task. What are the parts of the task? It helps to It helps divide up the tasks. The other is Latimer. If you've not used that, which is an AI that has been fine-tuned on Black and brown sources, credited and copyright acknowledged, oral histories, etc. So it has a different perspective. So there are tools emerging that will allow us to help bridge those equity gaps, because at the moment they're being exacerbated because the wealthy white men are the most likely to be using AI tools in college right now.
I know we're out of time, but since you mentioned this, I think I want to follow up, but we really need to keep just one very brief answer here because we're out of time. I mean, one big concern that I think many people have, and this has come up in the 2 live sessions we've had, and it comes up in the comments in your book, is with large language models, is the biases of these various models. And we've already seen how bias in search engines is causing sort of a societal polarization and diminished trust in everything from politics to science. I could imagine how the creation of material, even innovative and creative material, is making people completely lose trust in what they see and read. So now that we add artificial intelligence into the mix, are we in danger of an even more pernicious polarization apocalypse?
Yes.
I like the shortness of that answer.
I'll say one more thing, which is that, right, AI, like the internet, can give you just answers that you like with and bias. The one saving grace about AI, though, is that its bias is easier to change. All you have to do is ask it, right? If you use For Omni on your phone and say, no, be more aggressive, less aggressive, talk like a Republican, talk like a Democrat, right? Tell me why my life work is meaningful. Tell me why it's meaningless, right? You can immediately change its bias. And of course, humans can't do that. So if you're looking for, I want to find research that challenges my point of view, AI can do that. A tool like Consensus or Elicit will do that with real results, real published papers. It'll change the bias in a way that a human is really hard to do.
And it does that without emotions.
Or, well, that's interesting. It'll do it without getting, which is why it's more persuasive, because it doesn't get emotional. But of course, the new emotionally intelligent AIs are really emotionally intelligent, which is scary.
Well, unfortunately, when you're having fun, time flies, and this last hour has certainly flown by like nothing. So I'd like to first of all thank everybody in the audience for listening to this podcast, but especially thank our 2 guests, José Bowen and Eddie Watson, for first of all sharing their book and the Perusall Engage event with us. Thank you both so much for this wonderful conversation.
Glad to be here.
Thank you, Eric. Enjoyed it.
Their book, Teaching with AI, is available from the Johns Hopkins University Press website and through the Perusall catalog. And hey, if you want to start a book club reading of the book, log into Perusall, click on the book or journal club title, and a few clicks later, you can invite others to buy access to the book and join your book club, your own private book club event. Please check the Perusall website for future engagement book events this summer and in early fall. Finally, you can find our Social Learning Amplified podcast and more on perusall.com/social learning amplified. Subscribe to find out about other episodes. I hope to welcome you back on a future episode. Social Learning Amplified is sponsored by Perusall, the social learning platform that motivates students by increasing engagement, driving collaboration, and building community through your favorite course content. To learn more, join us at one of our introductory webinars. Visit perusall.com to learn more and register.